the neshama of Said's father, Moshe that Rashi HaKohen. Okay, so we're picking up here. Today's daf is daf Nun Beis 52. The rabbi did me a favor, starting part of the way down, so we're at the Mishnah on Nun Beis. Okay, mitzvahs hanisrafin. So we finished off at the tail end of the Mishnah. We said zoom mitzvahs haniskalin. We finished discussing the punishment, the death administered by Bezdin that was by stoning, and now we're going to today address the other forms of misa in understanding how they work. So mitzvahs hanisrafin. So when someone is chayav a misa of sreifa, of burning. What is that? We're going to walk through it here. Also bezevel ad arkuvosov. So they would stand him up in zevel, like manure, until his knees. And the basic idea, as Rashi explains, was we didn't want him thrashing around when we would administer this death penalty. So they would put him standing in this manure, kind of up to his knees, so it would keep him in place, so he's not moving around. The nosnin sudar kasha l'toch haracha. We would take a handkerchief or a scarf or whatever it is that was hard, like a stiff one, and we would put it inside of a soft one. And Rashi explains what's the reason we would do that. He says, Rashi, third line, karchin sudar kasha l'toch haracha. We would tie up the thick or hard scarf into the soft one, because the soft one is not strong enough to do, as we're going to see. The purpose of this was to force his mouth open, to be able to pour something into his mouth. So if you do just the soft one, it's not going to open his mouth. But if you use just the hard one, so that if you use a hard one, though, it's going to damage his neck, and it's going to cause his body to become misfigured or otherwise marked. So lefikach kasha mibafnim lachnog, that you would have a hard one inside in order to strangle him a little bit, as we see, just to get his mouth open. V'racha mibachutz lahagin, and we'd have the soft one on the outside in order to protect his neck. But in any event, they would, and we're going to see that this is actually the method that they used to use for when they would do strangulation. They did the same thing, that they would have the hard within the soft. We'll get there. So the difference of there we actually go all the way and pull the sides of these scarves until it chokes him. Here our purpose, as we'll see, is really just to get him to open his mouth. Okay, so we put the hard scarf in the soft one, and we wrap it around his neck. We wrap it around his neck. And each of the Eidim, because as we know, the Eidim are involved, the Eidim who convicted or part of convicting him are involved in administering the death penalty. So they each pull on this, on this thing that was somewhat choking him, until this forced his mouth to open. Madlik is a psila, and then we would light the wick, which Rashi explains. Madlik is matik. We would melt or heat up the wick, and we're going to see, as Rashi points out already here, that the psila is psila shel aver. It's like a wick made of lead. It's a rod of lead that they would light and melt, and that's what they would pour into his mouth. The zarkla topiv, they would pour it into his mouth. The oredas l'toch mayav, it would go down into his stomach. V'chomeres es b'nei mayav, and it would the Mefarshim explain. Some understand that it would just burn his insides, and that in turn would cause in some way causes death. Others understand that it actually was, I think the language they use is mechatech es mayav, that it would cut up his innards, meaning that it would cause them to disintegrate. In any event, that is the punishment of sreifa. We bury him in something to his knees so that he doesn't move around. We take the cloth around his neck to force his mouth open, and we pour into his open mouth. We pour in this, molten lead in order to actually cause the death as it goes down into his stomach or into his intestines. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda says, Afu im meis biyadam lo haya mekayim ba mitzvah sreifa. So Rabbi Yehuda was worried about this process of how you get his mouth open. So how did the Mishnah say you get his mouth open? By tying the cloth around his neck. But what happens if you pull too hard and you kill him? So then what's the problem with that? The problem is that you've strangled him. You didn't do streifa. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't like this idea, this way of opening his mouth. That rather, what would you do? You would open his mouth. You would forcibly open his mouth with some kind of instrument, against his will. Not that any of this is really in his will, but meaning, that you would, in some fashion, just pry open his mouth. Umadlik is apsilon. You would light this piece of lead. V'zarkol tof piv, and you would pour it down his mouth. V'yoredes l'tof mayav v'chomeres es b'nei mayav, and it would go down to his intestines or his stomach, and it would again either burn it or cause it to disintegrate in some fashion. Amr Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Tzadok. Rabbi Tzadok says as follows: Ma'aseh b'bas kohen echad shezinsa, that it happened once that there was a bas kohen who was mezaneh, who was unfaithful. V'hikufa chaviles muros v'sarfua. And what did they do? They surrounded her with branches and they burnt her. So what do you see? This is a very different kind of sreifa. We've been discussing how do you open the mouth, but basically they both agreed that you just pour some molten lead down there. This seems to be a case of literally a burning, a bonfire, and you burned her. So Amr Law, they said to him, no, that was a mistake. What we were dealing with was or actually the way Rashi explains it, the Gemara is going to explain later, it's not so much a mistake as much as we were dealing with a bezdin of tzedukim. So the tzedukim, as we know, they don't take the Torah Shabbal Peh, they take everything written in the Torah very literally, and therefore if the Torah says that you burn her, so then they felt you should make a fire and burn her. So when Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Tzadok says that that's how they used to do burning, they say no. When you observed that was a case of a bezdin of tzedukim, who we would not use their example or understand things the way they would do it because they just take the Torah literally. Okay, that's our Mishnah. My psila, when it says they would light this wick, Rav Masna psila shel aver, we're talking about a wick or a stick of lead that they would melt, and that's what they pour down her throat. So the Gemara asks, Minalan, how do we know that this is the method of killing? In other words, obviously, if it says to burn someone, then the more obvious thing would be like the tzedukim. So how do we know that you're supposed to burn someone from the inside in that way? So we say it's Gzeir Shava. Asya sreifa me'adas korach. That we bring a Gzeir Shava of sreifa from adas korach, because it says ba'eshti sareif. That in the case when it talks about the misa of sreifa in Vayikra, and in Bamidbar it says asher krivu hasrufim. So what would that happen? That we know that by Adas Korach, so they had Korach came Vadasa with his 250 people, and Moshe set up this test that you should each take the machta, and so at that time when when the earth opened up, and then it says that there was a fire that burned them all. So what do you see? Malahalan streifas neshama v'guf kayim. Just like there in the case of the story with Korach, the neshama got burnt, but the body was intact, which means that the people were killed, but their bodies were still there. And then the Gemara is going to ask, how do we know that in Korach? But in any event, so Afkan, so to here, when we apply the misa of streifas neshama v'guf kayim, that we're talking about a case where we kill them, but without destroying their body. So obviously, if you stick someone in a bonfire, their body gets destroyed from the outside. If you pour molten lead down, then from the outside, they look like a regular person. It's just that their insides have been burned and therefore killed them. Rabbi Lazar says something similar, but a little different than a little different. He says, Asya streifa mibnei Aaron. We bring a story from Gzeir Shava of streifa, from the story by Bnei Aaron, because when Nadav and Avihu got burned, it says Yivku es hasreifa. So that was the pasuk. It describes that they tell the Rebbeinu Shalom that tells Moshe that they shouldn't mourn them by uncovering their heads or doing different things. It says you could just cry about the burning. So you see the word sreifa is written there. And Sreifa, as we just said before, is also written in the case of where people have to get killed by Sreifa. So we say Mala Halan Sreifas and Shama V'Guf Kayim, just like there by Nadav and Avihu got burnt. They got killed by fire, but their bodies were still intact, and we're going to see how we know that. Afkan Sreifas and Shama V'Guf Kayim. So too here in the case of Misa. So we have two sources to understand how do we know that you don't burn someone in a bonfire, and rather that you would use this molten lead. One says because we see that the bodies were not burned in the case of Korach, and the other says because you see in the case of Nadav and Avihu that the bodies weren't burned. So the Gemara says, Mandi Yalach me'adas Korach minale. So in other words, how do we know? In other words, we're saying since we see by Korach and Nadav and Avihu that they got burned without their bodies getting burned, so too in the case of Misa. So the question is, how do we know their bodies didn't get burned? So he says, because by Korach it's written, the pasuk that was the pasuk in Mamidbar, which talks about that they would take the, remember everyone came with their machta, their fire pan, and so they took the fire pans and they used it to make a tzipo in the mizbeach, to make a covering for the mizbeach. But in any event, in that pasuk it says the fire pans of these who sinned with their souls. So what do you see? So you see, it's a funny language that they using the language of the soul tells you that they got killed. Their soul was taken from them. They had yitzias neshama, but they did not. Their bodies were not destroyed. So what about the one who does not learn from Adas Korach and wants to learn from Nadav and Avihu? Why didn't they like this pasuk? They say no. When it says benafshosam hahi sreifa mamish, that was literally burned up by fire. That wasn't internal burning. Hahi sreifas mamishi umay benafshosam. So then why did the pasuk use the word of nefesh, of a soul, which seems to imply not a regular case of killing? He says shenischaybu sreifal iske nafshosam, because the reason he used the word nefesh here is because they became chayav in sreifa because of matters of the nefesh, of the soul. Now what we're going to refer to here is matters of the reason he used the word nefesh is because these have to do with matters of food. Kedidarish lakish, I'm sorry, Kedaresh lakish. The Amar Resh Lakish, my defsiv Resh Lakish says, what's the pasuk that's written? This is a pasuk in Tehillim. It says, "B'chanfe lage ma'od charak alai shinemo." So it's saying as follows: "B'chanfe," with those who were a machanif is someone who gives someone too much praise or flattery. Lage are those who are lag. They're mocking or scorning. Ma'og, Rashi says, ma'og is a lashon of food. Where does he learn it from? Because we know the story with Eliyahu when he needed the food and he went to the almana and she had the flour and oil that kept lasting. So there when he first encounters her, he says to her, she says to him, that she swears that she doesn't even have ma'og is a kind of cake or something. But in any event, you see it's a reference to food. So it says that b'chanpe lage, with people who give excessive praise or who scorn, ma'og relating to food, charak alinisha nemo, that I grind the teeth. B'shvil chanufa shechnifu lekarach al iske legima charak aleim tar shal gehenim shino. So it's saying because of the chanifa, because of the flattery that they gave to Korach, in terms of eating, that the Sar Shal Gehenim, the keeper of Gehenim, or the prince of Gehenim, would grind his teeth. But in any event, what's the basic idea here? The way Rashi explains is that food was a part of how Korach got his people. In other words, the way to people is food. You really throw a good kiddush. So he, Korach did this. He fed them food, and they in turn became connected to him through that, and they were mechanef him. They propped him up and gave him all this praise, and that kind of led to the process. So therefore, in reference to that, the pasuk refers to their death, benafshosam, with their souls, in the sense of benafshosam, with the food that was used. But in any event, they're saying that the word nafshosam was not there to demonstrate how they got killed, how they got burned, and that it was burned from their nefesh and not their guf, but rather it was just coming to allude to the food that was part of the process of leading them down that path. Okay, so that's how the one who learns it from Korach learns it. How does the one who learns it from Nadav and Avihu, how does he know that Nadav and Avihu got burned on the inside, but their outside, their guf was not affected? Because it's written in the pasuk, Vayamusu lifnei Hashem ke'ein misa. It says they died in front of Hashem, similar to misa. So the language of dying is when someone dies, the Rebbeinu Shalom takes away their neshama. You don't see anything. You don't see anything if a person is on their deathbed and they expire. You don't see anything external. It's just they die. So when it says that Nadav and Avihu died in front of Hashem, they're saying it was similar to Misa in the sense when the Rebbeinu Shalom takes someone's life, you don't see anything on the outside. So too here, when we burn them, when Nadav and Avihu got burned, you didn't see anything on the outside. It looked like they just died. So okay, that seems like a good raya. So the ones who wanted to learn it from Adas Korach, why didn't they learn it from Nadav and Avihu? So they say Ahu Sreifa Mamish. So it's a similar structure. In each case, they bring a pasuk. They say no, the other one is talking about a real fire. Ahu Sreifa Mamish Havai. So the Gemara says, okay, if that was a real fire, my musu. So then why did he use this language of a musu, which seems to imply dying without some externally recognizable event? So the Gemara says, no, that it was just the Askal Bahu B'Gavoy Kein Misa. They said it's true that it's a reference to death that the Rebbeinu Shalom administers, but it was not because they didn't get fully burned, but rather because that the fire started inside, which means at the beginning of the fire you didn't see something evident, and in that fashion it was similar to when the Rebbeinu Shalom killed someone. But at the end of the day, the fire spread from inside to outside, and therefore you have to learn from Nadav and Avihu. You can't learn from Adas Korach, because by Adas Korach, it was actually their bodies got burned up. The Sanya Abba Yossi ben Destoy Omer, how do you know that it started from inside? Although they actually both agree with what happened. The question is this all that happened, or did it start from the inside and spread outside? But in any event, how do you know that it started from the inside? Maybe it stayed there, maybe it spread. Because we know Abba Yossi ben Destoy says Shnei Chutin Shalesh Yatsu mi Beis Kodesh HaKadoshim. Two chutin are like threads of fire left the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. V'nechleku la'arba, and those two strings or streams of fire split into four. V'nechnesu shnayim b'chot moshel zeh v'shnayim b'chot moshel zeh v'sarfum. That two of the streams of fire went into each into the two nostrils of Nadav, and two streams of fire went into the two nostrils of Avihu, and it burned them. So you see that the even there, the fire at a minimum started from the inside, maybe stayed in the inside, maybe didn't. Okay. So the Gemara asks the question, Vatochal osam, and it says that the fire ate them. Again, in this story in Vayikra. So it's so the question is, it says it ate them. The Gemara understands that osam is a miyot. He's coming to say that it burned up something, but not everything. So therefore, they're saying if you understand that it burned them inside but not outside, so you're going to say that's what it says. The fire ate osam is them because it ate their insides, but it left the outsides. But if it burned them entirely, then what's the miyat of osam? So the Gemara says osam below bigdehem, that it burned. According to the one who understands that their bodies got fully burned, it was saying that Nadav and Avihu, their entire bodies got burned, but their clothes were not burned. And again, presumably the purpose of such a death was to demonstrate its miraculous nature, because ordinarily if the body inside burns up, you would think the clothes would burn, but they didn't. Okay, so now we have two sources for the idea that Sreifa is ingesting this molten lead rather than getting burned. So the Gemara says, so you're learning from either Nadav and Avihu or from Adas Korach. So the Gemara says, "V'neilef mi parman israfim." Why not learn from Parman Israfim? So we actually encountered Parman Israfim a little while ago when we were dealing with how many machanas you take the person out of. But the Parman Israfim, as we know, is the Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibor, is that if the Sanhedrin paskin something and the majority of people go off, or else the power of the Kohen Gadol, when the Kohen Gadol does this, makes that mistake. So we talked about the fact that you take the parim and you offer them, and then you go outside to burn them. But in any event, this Gemara is actually, for those who remember that Gemara, is going to be very similar. So you're saying, why are you saying we learn from Nadav and Avihu or from Adas Korach about what does it mean for someone to get burned. Why don't you learn from the Parman Nisrafim, which basically you took the par, you took it out of the Beis HaMikdash, and you burned it in its entirety. So maybe learn from there that Sreifa means burning someone up. So the Gemara says, Mala Halan Sreifa Mamish, Afkan Sreifa Mamish. So you should learn that just like there by Parman Nisrafim they get burned up, so too here by Misas Bezdin they should also get burned up entirely. So the Gemara says, no. Mistabra me Adam Havalei Melef. No, it makes more sense to learn from a person. So if we're trying to figure out how do you kill a person who's Chayav Sreifa, it makes more sense to learn from Nadav and Avihu or from Adas Korach, who are people, than it makes sense to learn from an animal. Why? Shekain Adam Chote, because first of all the people we're dealing with here, someone who's Chayav Sreifa, Nadav and Avihu, Adas Korach, all of them did a sin. The Parim and Esrafim, they didn't sin. They were the unfortunate cow, or maybe fortunate, I don't know, the one who got used for this carbon. So first of all, that Nadav and Avihu and Adas Korach and the person who needs to get killed, those are all people. They've all sinned, unlike the animals. Neshama is going on the fact. I'm sorry, one second. That Netilas Neshama. Oh yeah, so it's saying Netilas Neshama is that all of them, the fire is what kills them. Nadav and Avihu and Adas Korach and the person who is Chayav Sreifa, all of them, it's the fire that killed them. In the case of the Parim and Nisrafim, though that par was shechted already, it was killed by shchita, it wasn't killed by fire. So therefore, it makes more sense to learn from people who are killed by fire than learning from an animal who is killed by shchita. And Pigol is a little different than the first three. It's saying Pigol does not exist by Nadav and Avihu. Pigol obviously is when a Kohen brings the carbon with the intention that it should be eaten outside of its proper time or place. That's Pigol. So Pigol can apply to the Parim and Nisrafim. If the Kohen would have in mind when he does it that he's gonna do it in the wrong time, for example, that would be Pigol. So Pigol can apply by Parim and Nisrafim. It does not apply by a person who's Chayav Sreifa. It does not apply by Nadav and Avihu. It does not apply by Adas Korach. So therefore, we have four reasons why you see that. It makes more sense to compare someone who needs to be burned by Sreifa to Nadav and Avihu or Adas Korach than it makes sense to compare him to a cow. So the Gemara says, and again, this is very similar to the Gemara we have, but it's actually the opposite order. So the Gemara says, Adarabba. No, it's better to learn from the case of the Parim and Nisrafim. Why? Shekain machshir, because when you're doing a machshir, you're doing the will of the Ribono Shel Olam. So when you do Parim and Nisrafim, so the Ribono Shel Olam told you to bring karbanos, so you're bringing the karbanos. The Ribono Shel Olam told you to kill a person with Chayav Sreifa, so you should compare killing a person with Chayav Sreifa to killing an animal, because in both cases, that's something the Ribono Shel Olam wanted. To compare it to Nadav and Avihu or to Adas Korach, who are doing something against the Ribono Shel Olam, you shouldn't compare. That's number one. And number two, Lidoros, because the killing someone who's Chayav Misa by Sreifa and doing the carbon of Parim and Nisrafim, that's something that is an ongoing thing. In other words, if that's applicable, you bring that carbon or you kill the person, as versus the stories of Nadav and Avihu and Adas Korach are something that happened one time. That's not something that's learned Lidoros for generations. So you see a couple of reasons why you should rather learn from Parim and Nisrafim, from the carbon of the Parim and Nisrafim, rather than learning from Nadav and Avihu or Adas Korach. So the Gemara says, okay, but Hanach Nefishin. But you have 4-2. You have four reasons that say you're better off learning from Nadav and Avihu or Adas Korach. We listed the four, which was Adam, Chot, and Neshama, and Pigol, and you only have two, Machshir and Lidoros, that say you should compare it to Parim and Nisrafim. So that's the reason we learn from Nadav and Avihu or Adas Korach rather than learning from Parim and Nisrafim. Okay, so now the Gemara goes back and says, Mandi Yalov me Adas Korach, my Tamil Yalov me Bnei Aaron. We actually asked ourselves this, but the Gemara is just setting it up. He's saying, okay, so what's the reason that the one who learns from Korach doesn't learn from Bnei Aaron? And actually, as the Mefarshim point out, the opposite is also true. According to the one who learned it from Bnei Aaron, why doesn't he learn it from Adas Korach? So we said before, Ahu Sreifa Mamish Havai, because we say they each didn't like the other person because they said the case you brought was not a case of internal burning, it was a case of external burning. So what do you see? You see according to either view, the one who learned from Nadav and Avihu or the one who learned from Adas Korach, there was a different case where it was an actual burning. So the Gemara says, V'neilaf minei. So learn from there. And then, as Rashi points out, now you're dealing person to person. So you say, why? So let's take the one who says that they learned from Adas Korach. So you say, why do you learn from Adas Korach, which burned from the inside and not the outside? Maybe learn from Nadav and Avihu, which burned entirely. And according to one who says Nadav and Avihu, say, why are you learning from Nadav and Avihu, which burned internally, not externally? Learn from Adas Korach that they burned entirely. So why not learn from there? And then you can't say it's 4-2 because they're both dealing with a person. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Aruah, Amar Kra. The pasuk says, we actually encountered this before. The pasuk says you should love your friend like yourself, which means even when you're killing him, you should try to give him the nicer punishment. So if you're given a choice, whichever view you hold, if you hold there was one case where a person was burned internally and not externally, and another case where they were burned in their entirety, so better to give him the misa where he's only burned inside and his body is not become maneuverable. It's better to do it that way, and that's part of the mitzvah of giving him the better or nicer misa. So now the Gemara says, so he says, okay, fine. So if you're telling me, how do I know if I'm given a choice of burning him entirely or burning him internally? I should burn internally is because you should be nice to the guy. So then we're saying, this whole Gemara, we wasted our time because we were sitting here trying to prove from Psukim, Gzer Shava, that you burn him inside, not outside from the Psukim. What do you need the Psukim for? Just say a Svara. Say that you should, of course, give him internal burning because that's a nicer misa for him. Why do you need the Gzer Shava? So the Gemara says, he lav Gzer Shava, have amina streifas neshama v'guf, kayam lav streifahi klal. So he says, because if I would not have had the Gzer Shava, what would I have said? I would have said that this kind of burning, where you pour something into a person and his external body stays intact, that's not burning. So when the Torah says you have to burn someone, it means in a bonfire. So we would not apply v'yahavta l'recha kamocha if we didn't know that this is a form of burning. That's why we needed the Gzer Shava to tell you that this is a form of burning. So now if you're going to tell me that the Torah says you need sreifa and that's not a sreifa, so then what do you do v'yahavta l'recha kamocha? So he says, so if you have to burn him in its entirety at bonfires, then at least lapish lechavile zmuras kihechet delisra flago. So it says, so okay, what should you do to be nice to him? If you would not know from the Gzer Shava that pouring lead into someone counts as burning him, I would say you have to do a bonfire. How will you be nice to him? You have to l'recha kamocha. You would add more branches so that he'll burn quicker. But at the end of the day, you would feel that you need to do a bonfire. So therefore, the Gemara says, that's why I needed the Gzer Shava, Kamash Malan, to tell you that pouring molten lead down someone's throat is in fact a valid form of sreifa. And then because once we know from the Gzer Shava that that's a valid form of sreifa, so then if we're given a choice, because again, either view thought there was one where Nadav and Avihu or Adas Korach got burned in the entirety and one got burned only internally. So once we're given a choice and we know both are a valid form of sreifa, then we apply v'yahavta l'recha kamocha to tell you that you should pick the nicer death, which is the one where you burn him from the innards and not from outside. Okay, now since we talked about Nadav and Avihu, very interesting Gemara. Gemara says, that Moshe and Aaron were walking up to Har Sinai, and Nadav and Avihu were walking behind them. All of Klal Yisrael was there. They were going up to Har Sinai. Amar lo Nadav laVihu. So Nadav said to Avihu, so what do you see? That this was a power play. Nadav and Avihu said, how much longer, when are these two old men going to die? Meaning Moshe and Aaron, and you and I are going to lead the generation. So Amar Lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu said in response to this talking that way about Moshe and Aaron, Hanira mi covers me. Let's see who buries who. And at the end of the day, Aaron and Moshe buried Nadav and Avihu, not vice versa. Amra Papa Hainadami Inshi. This is, as people say, the saying, Nefishi Gamli Sabi Detine Mashche Dehugni. That there are plenty of older camels that are carrying the hides or the bodies of the younger camels. In other words, the idea is that, I don't know, sometimes the old people are stronger and win out. Okay. Amar Rabbi Elazar, the Shas says Rabbi Elazar, Amar Beis, Lamat Tamar Chacham Domel Lefnei. So the Rashi explains, what we're about to talk about here, is we referenced in passing that Korach, and especially the way Rashi understood on Amar Aleph, that Korach gave the people food and drink, and that's how he got them to join his plot here. Now, what kind of people were we dealing with by Adas Korach? As Rashi points out, it says that these were Talmidei Chacham, because it says in the Si'eda, Kriyei Moed, Anshe Shem, these were significant people, the 250 people that came with Korach. So the Gemara is going to say, L'mat Talmid Chacham Daimon Lefnei Amaretz. So he says, how does an Amaretz look at a Talmid Chacham? So it says, B'tchila, in the beginning, Doma Lekiton Shel Zav. So Rashi says, B'tchila, that initially, when he comports himself with dignity and with honor, so then the Amaretz looks at the Talmid Chacham and says, this is like a jug, a golden jug. They look at him very highly. Siper Hemenu, so if they start shooting the breeze and just schmoozing and talking about non-important things, so then Doma Lekiton Shel Kesev, he comes down in his eyes a little bit. He comes down in his eyes. Nenamin Manu. And now what happens if not only does he not comport himself with kavod and he sits there and just talks with them about narishkeit, what happens when he actually is nena from them and they feel that I am supporting or I'm feeding this Talmid Chacham, then it becomes like a earthenware jug, meaning they lose respect for them at all. And once it's broken, there's no fix. So what do you see? A Talmid Chacham has to comport himself with dignity. Once a Talmid Chacham starts to act like other people and just schmooze with them or takes things from them. So what happened here? That these were 250 Talmidei Chachamim, but once they took food from Korach and they got involved in what he was doing, that they lost their standing in the eyes of Korach, and he was able to bring them along in this fashion to commit the Aveira of Korach Ladasa. Okay. Imrasa Bas Tali Bas Kohen Shezinsa Havai. We had this woman, Imrasa, the daughter of Tali, who was a Bas Kohen. Tali was a Kohen, and this was his daughter, Shezinsa Havai. She was Mizana. Akbar Rav Chama Bar Tuvia Chavile Zmuras V'Sarfa. So Rav Chama Bar Tuvia stood her up or surrounded her with branches and burnt her. So this is the bonfire approach, which we referenced in our Mishnah. Rav Yosef said, Ta B'Tarti. He made double mistake. He was mistaken because, as we learned from Rav Masna in the beginning of the Gemara, that Rav Masna is the one who said that you pour lead down the throat. So first of all, this was the wrong way to apply Misa. And they messed up in a more fundamental way. Not only did they pick the wrong form of death to give, but the Sanya we learned in the Brisa, that it says that you come when you're talking about nida by judging matters of putting someone to death. It says you come to the Kohanim, the Leviim, and to the judge that's there in those days. And then the pasuk continues with the Rashta ve'gidu lecha is dvar mishpat, and you go to them for judgment, right? So it's saying bezman sheyesh kohen yesh mishpat, bezman she'ein kohen ein mishpat. So this tells you that when there's a kohen to go to, then there's judgment of death, capital judgment, and when there's no kohen, there's no capital judgment. And Rashi brings, and Tosfos reference also, that we also know this idea that as long as the Sanhedrin is in the Lishkas HaGazis, that then you judge capital cases, and when they're not, you don't judge capital cases. So they had double issue with this bonfire approach. A, it's the wrong form of sreifa because you're supposed to do the molten lead, and B, you shouldn't have even killed the person. You shouldn't have killed this Imrasa, because this was a time when the Beis HaMikdash had already been destroyed, and therefore there was no capital punishment at that time. Okay, I'm Rabbi Elazar Rebbe Tzadok Ma'aseh B'Bas Kohen Shezinsa. So in our Mishnah, we said Rabbi Elazar Rebbe Tzadok said, I remember seeing when they burned a Bas Kohen, and then the Mishnah said that they said back to him, no, that was not a proper bezdin. So I'm Rabbi Yosef Bezdin shall stukim hava, as I referenced before. So that they answered him and said, no, don't learn from there that they burnt her on a pyre, on a bonfire, because that was a case of stukim. So the Gemara says, was that the back and forth they had, that he said, I saw they burnt her on a bonfire, and they said back, no, that was a bezin of tzedukim? Tanya, we learned in a brisa a different back and forth. I'm Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Tzadok. Zachruni, Zachurani, I remember Kisha Yisi Tinuk when I was a little kid, Umorka Baksefa Shalaba, and my father took me to a public execution. The Viu Baskoin Shazinsa, and they brought a Baskoin that was Mizana, Vikifua, Chabilis Muris, Sarfu, and they brought bundles of twigs and they burnt her. So he says, you see that you are supposed to burn someone by bonfire. So Amrullah, they said to him in this price, the Katan Hayisa, no, you were a little kid if you were on your father's shoulders. The aim may be in Rayam and a Katan. We don't listen to testimony of what you remember from when you were a little kid. So in any event, it's a problem because our Mishnah said that they responded to him, it was a Bezin Shal Tzdukim. And the Brisa says they responded to him, no, you were a kid when you saw that. So the Gemara says, Shnei Maisim Havu. I don't know. Somehow he was had the luck to be at all the bad killings. So he was there when he was a kid, and they said, well, you were a kid. And then he was also there as an adult, but they said, no, that was a Bezin Shal Tzdukim. So the Gemara says, Hayar Malhu Bereisha. Well, 1 second. What was the order here? Ilema HaKamaisa. If you're going to say the one that we learned first, meaning the one in our Mishnah, where they said it was a Bezin Shal Tzdukim, Amrluhu Bereisha. I'm sorry. Ilema HaKamaisa Amrluhu, that he first told him the first story where he saw the Bezin when he was an adult. Bereisha, that's what he did first. Amrluhu Kishu Gadol. He says, but that doesn't make any sense. If they already told him you're wrong when you were an adult and you saw this and that was a Bezin Shal Tzdukim, you're going to bring me a raya from when you were a kid. So it must not have been that. That first he told them the story about what he witnessed when he was a kid. And they said, sorry, you were a little kid on your father's shoulders. We're not going to listen to you. So then he said, he said, but wait, when I was a gadol, I also saw them do this. And they said to him, that this was not a proper Bezdin because of the Bezdin Shal Tzdukim. So he saw both stories. First, they told him, we're not going to take your kid story because you were a kid, and we're not going to take your adult story because that was a case of Tzdukim. Okay, so we've addressed the Misa of Skila. Mitzvahs Hanaragin. So how would they kill someone with a sword? And by the way, someone raised the issue to me that sometimes the Gemara references Hereg, and sometimes it references Sayef, a sword. Those are the same thing. So as we'll see here, what was mitzvahs and naragin? How would they kill someone with a sword? They would chop off his head with a sword from the front in the way that the malchus, that the king does it. Rabbi Yehuda Amar nivel hulo. That's disgusting to him. Now Rashi points out, what do they think at this point? They think that Rabbi Yehuda's answering, that's not nice. You stand him up and you chop off his head, and then his body just falls to the ground like that. That doesn't seem like a nice way to treat him. That you should put his head on the sadon. What's the sadon? Rashi says it's the it's something a beam that the blacksmith used to use. The Rashi and Shabbos and Kuf Gimel tells us that they would bang with this hammer all the time. It would get dulled. So they would have this piece of wood. It was kind of like a knife sharpener, except it was for a hammer that would smooth out the hammer. But in any event, he says they would put his head on some kind. They would stand him up against some kind of beam, and they would put his head there. The kotzitz bekofitz, and they would hit him with an axe, and that's how they would kill him. So Amr Lo, they said back to Rabbi Yehuda, Ein misan muvelas mizu. You told us you didn't like our approach because he was standing up and killed him, but at least we were killing him with a sword, which is a nice way to kill him. You're killing him with an axe, which is a blunter instrument, and it just damages him more. That's much more of being menavel him. Okay, so Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Amalan Rabbi Yehuda Chachamim. So Rabbi Yehuda said to the Chachamim, no, you misunderstood me. I also agree that hitting him with an axe is a less nice way to kill him. But what can we do? The Torah says, that it says you should not do in their ways. So Rabbi Yehuda's issue was not that they were killing him standing up and he's going to fall down. His issue was when you take a sword and chop someone from the front, that's how they used to kill people in the Gaish method. And therefore, the pasuk says you should not go in their chukos. If we have a minute or two at the end, I'll tell you something interesting. We'll see if we run out of time. Rabbanan, what about the Rabbanan? What do they do with this? Kivan dechsiv sayef b'raisa lo minayu kagamrinan. He says, no, he says, just the fact that that's how the Romans or whoever was did it, that doesn't prove that we're going b'chukoseyim. If the Torah tells us to kill someone with a sword, we can kill him with a sword. We don't have to worry that the Goyim happen to do the same thing. Because if you're not going to tell me that, this that we learned, that we say that we burn. So the custom was that when a king would die, you would burn all his possessions. Why? So no one else could use it. Now that is what the Amorim used to do. Also, the Goyim used to do. So it says you can do that for a Jewish king, and it's not dark Amori. The Gemara says, how do you do that? It's written in the pasuk that you shouldn't do the method of the Goyim. So rather, but rather, since the Torah tells us that you can burn a king's things, now who remembers where we had this recently? Okay, we had it very recently when we were talking about whether a hesped is for the benefit of the dead person or for the living people, and we talked about the story where Yeshayahu Hanavi said to Tzidkiyahu, even though this was talking when they were going into Golos, when Bavel was coming and attacking the Jews, that Yeshaya gave a nevuah to Tzidkiyahu that don't worry, you're going to die like your fathers, and your stuff is going to get burned, and people are going to say about you that you're Adam, that you're a master. So in any event, what do you see? They said that your stuff is going to get burned just like your father's stuff. So you see that Jewish kings also had their things burned. So therefore, and so you see, in that case, we're not, the fact that the Goyim happened to do it, we're not learning from them. We know it from a pasuk. Here also, given the Chsiv Sayif Beraisa, so too with killing someone with a sword, the fact that it happens to coincide with the way the Romans or whoever was in charge used to kill people doesn't matter, because at the end of the day we have a source in the Torah for killing someone with a sword. So if Yehuda didn't want to kill someone with a sword by chopping his head off because he said that's what the Goyim do. But we say we don't care, because the reason we do it is not because of the Goyim. The reason we do it is because the Torah tells us stuff. Okay, now the Gemara says, so now we're going to reference that a little bit later on in a few weeks. We're going to learn a Mishnah. These are people who are killed by getting their heads chopped off. Someone who's a murderer and someone who is a member of Ir Nidachas. Okay, it makes sense that at Ir Nidachas that we know that you get killed by a sword, because it says at the mouth of a sword. But how do I know that a murderer gets killed by the sword? Because we learned nakom yinakim. So he says, the pasuk says that when someone kills his slave, it says nakom yinakim. He should have nakama. Nikimazu any mahu. But I don't know, and obviously the nakama for killing someone is getting killed. So we know that he gets killed. But the question is, how does he get killed? I don't know it. Yeshu Omer, when it says Vesi alechem cherev cherev no kemes. I'm sorry. So that when it says in the pasuk, this is a pasuk in Vayikra in the Tochacha. It says that if you don't listen, and I'm going to bring the sword that is nokim, that avenges for the nokemis nokim bris, that avenges for the bris. So what do you see? You see that it says cherev, a sword by nakama. So now you see nakama means a sword. So when it says that one who kills his eved gets killed with nakama, it means that someone who kills his eved, who's a rotzeach, gets killed by the sword. So Haviyomer Nikima Zu Sayef. So that tells you that Nikima means Sayef. So okay, so you say the aim of the bar is like Mivrez. So it says maybe it means that you stab him, you stick the sword into him. How do you know that you cut off his head with the sword? So the Gemara says Lefi Cherev Ksiv, because it's written, as we just said, by Ir Nidachas, they do it Lefi Cherev. We know Cherev Pifios Biyadam. We say that there's a sword that has two sides, right? So if you're talking about sticking the sword into someone, that's only one point. When you talk about a cherev has two sides, means it's the sides of the sword. So therefore, you see that you use the side of the sword and not the point of the sword, which tells you that you chop off his head, not stab him. So the Gemara says, "Aim of the ovid like gistra." So he's saying, "Okay, fine. I'm using the sword, the side of the sword. Maybe what we should do is take the guy and split him right down the middle. And you take the sword and you do it like that." I'm Rav Nachman, I'm Rav Arvu, I'm Akra. Rav Nachman says in Rav Arvu, and then the pasuk says, "You have to lerecha kamocha." As we've encountered many times, you should love your friend like yourself. Bar lo misa yafa, that you should give him the nicer misa, and it's obviously nicer to chop off his head than to take his entire body and cut him right down the middle. Ashkechan the katal avda. So fine. So you just brought me a raya that a murderer of an eved, of a slave, gets nakama. Nakama is a sword. So that you proved it by a slave. Barchorin minolan. How do we know that a regular person, a regular rotzeach, gets killed with a sword? So the Gemara says, so he says, okay, so let's say we don't know what punishment to give someone. we know that we've discussed this in the past, that if you don't know what punishment to give someone, you give them chenek. So here, though, is a problem, because if you're telling me, I see an eved, you have to give sayif, you have to give the sword. And a ben chorin, a regular person, you don't know, so you're going to give him chenek. But chenek is a lesser punishment than sword. So it's a kal v'chomer. If we're going to kill, if for killing an eved, someone gets the sword, then for killing a free person, for sure they should get the sword. So the Gemara says, Hani cholamanda amar chenek kal. That works well if in fact you understand that strangulation is a lesser punishment, and therefore obviously you're not going to give someone who kills a ben chorin a lesser punishment than a person who kills an eved. But according to the Chachamim, according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that chenek is more chamar than sayif, maybe in fact an eved gets sayif and a ben chorin would get chenek. So the Gemara says, "Naftalei miditanya." They learn now from the fact that we learned in the Brayso that the pasuk by Eglah Rufa says that you should clean out the innocent blood. Now, as follows, Rashi in the pasuk over there learns from there a halacha that if ultimately you find the murderer of the person who killed this person out there, even after they did the Eglah Rufa, you would still kill him. So what do you see? You see that pasuk dealing with a murderer. Rabbeinu Chanana learns from the pasuk the word teva'er that it says the pasuk says ubiarta harami karbecha. So he understands the gzeir shava ba'er. But in any event, what do you see? You see that there's a hekesh or gzeir shava between murderers and eglah rufa. Hukshu kol shokle dam la eglah rufa, and we compare all people who kill others to an eglah rufa. Malahalan b'sayif. So just like by Eglah Rufa, we kill them with a sword and from the neck. Afkan b'tzayev minatzaver. Because remember, what we're trying to prove here is how do we know? So we say, how do we know that you kill him? So a regular murderer with a sword and not with strangulation when it's not an eved. So I'm sorry, a regular murder when it's a regular person, not an eved. So we say you see because there's a gzeir shava between Eglah Rufa and murder, and therefore you see that by a murderer you do it just by Eglah Rufa by the neck, so too you do it here by the neck. So the Gemara says, so you say, fine, if you're telling me the way we know that you kill a murderer is from Eglah Rufa, how do they do it? They take an axe and they hit the back of the neck of the animal. So maybe you should say that when someone's a murderer, you don't chop off his head with a sword, but rather you hit him on the back of the neck with a axe. Rav Nachman says, the pasuk says that you should give him the nicer misa. So if you're given a choice between killing him with a sword from the front and a sharp sword and cutting off his head versus hitting him with a blunt axe on the back of his neck, you should pick the cleaner way. I haven't looked at tomorrow's daf yet, but maybe we'll just start at 5:55 if that works. Okay, thank you.